of the Korahites, according to Alamuth, a psalm.
God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the hearts of the sea, though its waters roar in foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. Selah. There is a river whose stream make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of the city. It shall not be moved. God will help when the morning dawns. The nations are in an uproar. The kingdoms totter. He utters his voice. The earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. Come behold the works of the Lord. See what desolations he has brought to the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I am exalted among the nations. I am exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Psalm 46 is one of the songs of Zion, a psalm that celebrates God's presence in the temple on Mount Zion, a presence that is promised security and blessing to God's people. Because this promised security and blessing is written during a time of catastrophe and enemies attacking, no matter what situation we find ourselves, Psalm 46 was written in extreme adversity, where God had to provide deliverance. And if there's any time we are facing extreme trouble, one could say that it's now. Before I chose this psalm, it was before we knew of Hurricane and Tropical Depression Ida. But this week, while I watched waters rising in my basement, I watched destruction in Louisiana, in cities, in Philadelphia, I couldn't help but think of Psalm 46. In Hebrew class, I had to translate Psalm 46 from the original text. And I wrote, the subject of Psalm 46 is everything is shaky, even the earth, except God and those whom God protects. My professor laughed at everything is shaky. But that's how I feel. This psalm shows that when trouble strikes, when our world is flipped upside down, God is enough to get us through. We never know what tomorrow holds. But this week, I've been reminded in a new way of how uncertain life can be. Like I said earlier, Ida brought a situation that John and I did not expect. But thankfully, we know that none of this is outside of the knowledge and plan of God. Psalm 46 powerfully and effectively conveys this truth. No matter what happens, no matter what life brings, we are safe in the care of God. Even when the earth falls out from under our feet, even when chaos surrounds us, God is our refuge, our protector, our safe shelter. Psalm 46 is a psalm of confidence and consists of 3 refrains. Each refrain has 3 elements: a statement of confidence declaring God's protection and presence, a description of God's care in the midst of trouble, and a call to stop and reflect. Selah. Each refrain ends with the Hebrew word Selah. My textbook definition of Selah is technical poetic notation of undetermined meaning. The word Selah is found only in poetry in the Old Testament. It occurs 71 times in 39 psalms, often in the same context of "to the choir master," indicating it may have musical interpretation. The presence and protection of God in the midst of natural disaster. He is our refuge from the storm. The first refrain leads with a statement of confidence that not only serves this section, but prefaces the entire psalm. The description of God as our refuge reminds us that God is our place of safety and protection. In some translations, refuge is translated to fortress. Fortress is a building that you go to protect yourself. We must note that God is not simply a refuge, He is our refuge. God protects those who are His. In addition, while those seeking refuge may be weak, God is our strength, as Psalm 61 states. Not only is God an available refuge, He's an accessible refuge. He is always near, always present, and always able to be found. It's not like when you call 911 and the fire alarms and the firemen come down and get in the fire truck and come to your house and all of a sudden they're present. God is there already. God doesn't have to get into a truck and play some sirens. He's there with you. Trouble will come, but God is always present. In verses 2 and 3, the psalmist provides a vivid picture of what that is overcome by disaster. He describes the earth shaking and waters rising. The waters get so high that they cover the mountains and challenge their stability. The mountains slip into the sea. We think about the earth, we generally think of it firm and unmovable, as Psalm 104 tells us. But there are things in life that make the ground feel like it's falling from underneath us. When the ground is shaky and the waters are rising, our natural reaction is fear. But the psalmist says he will not be afraid. He is confident that our God is higher than the waters and stronger than the mountains. He is our ever-present refuge. The setting in verses 4 through 7 is Jerusalem, the city of God. The psalmist describes the city that is both in danger of attack, but also filled with gladness. The city is calm in the face of danger because God's presence, a river of gladness, and His promised protection. A river mentioned in the city is very significant. If the psalmist is speaking of Zion, Jerusalem, Jerusalem does not have a river, only a few streams. However, the prophet Ezekiel anticipated a day when a mighty river would flow from the temple. Perhaps this is a metaphor for the chaotic waters of verses 3 and 4 becoming a life-giving stream. However, he does not reference the symbolic nature of the river, just as a symbolic river in Ezekiel. This river is another way of reassurance of God's provisions to us. No matter what's going on, we can find gladness through God's presence and assurance of his protection. The reality is that attacks will come, but God has the power to speak, to utter his voice, to change everything. Even in the most chaotic times in our world, God is in control. His presence and power are our hope. The refrain ends with a statement of confidence in the presence and protection of God. The Lord of hosts, the powerful leader of armies of angels, is with us. The God of Jacob, a merciful and covenant faithful God, is our fortress, a heavily protected building that cannot be penetrated. The presence and protection of God in the midst of war and chaos. He will bring peace. The final section describes how God will overcome and judge the wicked. But God doesn't come in judgment in order to bring more chaos. Instead, his judgment is a means of establishing peace. He brings desolation, judgment, and disarms the enemy. He breaks and destroys the weapons of the enemy. This section is different than the others, that it contains two imperatives. In verse 8, we are called to come and see the work of God, his judgment in establishing peace. In verse 10, we are called to be still, to stop, surrender, let go, and acknowledge God in his works. Again, the refrain ends with a statement of confidence in the presence and protection of God. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. How should we respond to this God who has shown himself as our refuge, as our resource, as our ruler? The psalmist commands us to be still. In verse 10, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Our future is secure. We will be blessed because God is with us. He will never leave us nor forsake us. He is our God, our refuge, our fortress. Let us not fear, but have faith. Let us not worry, but rather let us worship him and depend on him in the time of crisis.
Through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well.